It's very important because the other side is always saying that we are so blinded by our superstition and our religion that we are unable and incapable of objectively looking at science, and this certainly refutes that, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, and that was one of the purposes of the book, because most people in the book have PhDs in science, and many are practicing scientists.
Right. Well, now, you have a quote up here from Ernst Mayr, a zoologist at Harvard. I would love for you to talk to us about Ernst for a little bit.
Okay, let me just read exactly what he said, and this was a strong motivation for writing the book. One of the most influential evolutionary biologists of our time was Ernst Mayr, who was, of course, professor at Harvard. And he said that, quote, "No educated person any longer questions the validity of evolution, which we now know to be a simple fact." And he's been claiming this, by the way, for over 40 years. In 1967, he said, "Evolution is accepted by every scientist," he says. "And for this reason, it is no longer necessary to enumerate painstakingly the proofs for evolution." Now, when I read this, I thought, gee, I know many PhD-level scientists that do not accept evolution as we defined it. And in fact, I started to make a list of these scientists, and I ended up with over 3,000, and this is my list here. You can see it's pretty extensive.
Yeah, I'm just looking at a page, and every name on this page has a PhD after it almost. I think there's maybe one there that's a DDS, whatever that means. But it's PhD after PhD. And, you know, it's interesting that you've assembled 3,000 names of creation scientists, particularly in light of some of the other shows we've done that have talked about the tremendous persecution that sometimes scientists have to go through when it's discovered that they're a creationist.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I would have had many more names, but I did not add names to this list unless they were public. So they were public with their doubts about Darwinism, as I call them, Darwin doubters, or they published books about Darwinism, and it was very clear from the book that they did not accept the Darwinian worldview as I defined it a few seconds ago, or I got permission. And there are many I would have loved to add to the book, but
certainly
I couldn't because...
It would have been at their peril.
Right. And in fact, when I came out with the first edition, I did have 3 people write me and say, better get my name off there. I don't have tenure yet. I had actually several professors from Ivy League schools who said, please get my name off there. I don't have tenure yet. So when I get tenure, I'll come out of the closet, but not until then. So I took their names off right away.
A couple of things come to mind when you say that. First of all, I wonder how big a list we could make if we had God's knowledge, how many more PhDs there would be that were creation scientists if they hadn't been persecuted and if there hadn't been prejudice against them because of their faith. And that shouldn't be happening in this country. But secondly, there's a hopeful side to that. I think there are more folks out there who are creationists than maybe Ernst Mayr would ever even suspect.
Oh yeah, many more. Now, many of these are Muslims and other faiths. They're not all Christians. But nonetheless, when you look at the 3 so-called people of the book, Christians, Muslims, and the Jews, there is an enormous number of people that simply don't buy into evolution.
All right, enough about Ernst Mayr. Let's talk a little bit about his definition of evolution. Can we do that?
Okay, and the way I define it, some people say, no, that's not right. So let's use Ernst Mayr's definition of evolution. By the way, he lived to be 99, and he wrote several books in his last decade of life, and he just died recently, so he's not listening to this program now.
Okay.
Anyways, he defined evolution, he calls this Darwinism, which is actually the term I often use. He calls this Darwinism, and this is his definition. Quote, all supernatural phenomena and causations. The theory of evolution by natural selection explains the adaptiveness and diversity of the world solely materialistically. It no longer requires God as creator or designer. So he's specifically saying that the existence of all life, in fact, the existence of everything, is due to purely natural causes. There's no need to invoke God or any supernatural intelligence at all in anything in what we see around us, living and non-living.
So what was your goal in writing the book?
Besides to show that there are many people who accepted creation because of the evidence, I also find exploration of the evidence helps solidify the position that indeed creation is supported by the scientific evidence, and some were theistic evolutionists who became creationists because of their study of the evidence. But one of my goals was so much scientific evidence out there in support of creationism, and this evidence was, well, it's hard to convey to the common people. And so I wanted to write a book that would be easy to understand by the common people.
A readable human interest story of creationists who have accepted creation based on evidence. It's not that their faith said, well, this is what I have to believe about evolution. It's that the evidence of science brought them to believe in creation.
Right, and many stressed very strongly that I would not be a Christian today if it was not for my study of evolution and my realization that evolution is not supportable by the science, and therefore they became creationists, and then they became Christians.
Do you think it takes more faith to be an atheist than it does to be a Christian?
Oh, clearly. And in fact, there's a book written by Norm Geisler, who you know personally, and he wrote a book titled, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. And he shows that indeed it takes more faith to be an atheist than it does to be a creationist.
It does, because you have to get something from nothing. That's right. You were an atheist at one point. Let's talk about your own personal journey before we talk about these other guys.
Well, the first thing I looked at when I was questioning my atheism, and I began to question atheism for a number of reasons. One reason was a lot of the scholarship that atheists did, I realized through a lot of reading, was just not valid. And the next step was, indeed, is there any evidence for evolution? Because a major reason why many people are atheists is because they are convinced we do not need a creator to account for the origin of life and the universe. And so this is a foundational doctrine of atheism. And so I decided, well, if this is not true, indeed, if evolution is not valid, then that negates the main reason why many people are atheists. And so then that forced me to look into creationism first and then Christianity later.
Why don't you go up to the board and talk to us about some of the others in the book as well.
First, I should mention that some of these people in the book were reared Christians.
Yes?
But they held on to their conclusions due to the evidence.